Hello, friends, and welcome to another installment of God Talks with Reverend Goodwin. I have the privilege and honor of talking to Reverend Heather Ramsey-Mabrouk, who serves as our director for the Center for Transformational Leadership of the Southern New England Conference. And I'm imagining that during our conversation, Heather, you might explain to people what all of that means. But it sounds really nice. Like when you think about it, it's like, I went to a program in the Center for Transformational Leadership, and that's the impact, but really the foundation of the hard work you and your team are doing. I'm hoping that during our conversation, people will get a little bit of an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better, but also become a little bit more grounded in the work that you do. So Thank you for doing this and being willing to be a part of this. I usually start all of our God Talks with a very, very simple question about how someone might identify and or describe you. And so, Heather, the toggling question I'm going to give is part of your work through the Center for Transformational Leadership is also, of course, very much so intimately connected to your work with Together We Thrive, where you have had the ability and the opportunity to pull together some of our covenant partners and our ecumenical partners. So I'm going to ask you, how do you feel that one of our ecumenical partners, and you can choose anyone you'd like, that you've worked intimately with in programmatic functions and other places, how might they describe Heather to us? What do you think they would say about that working relationship and maybe about your vision of ecumenism?
Yeah, so I think I had the deepest working relationship with the New England Synod of the ELCA Lutheran, not only because they were a very active, very invested partner in Together We Thrive, but also Martha White, who was a part of the Together We Thrive staff team, was serving as an assistant to the bishop. And so I had a very clear communication channel. And so I think from their perspective, how they might describe me is very intentional and strategic, and probably pretty serious with a little hint of fun here and there that pops up out of nowhere. But also just really open-minded and open to hearing what gifts each of our judicatories were bringing to the conversation, recognizing that I don't know everything. And I don't pretend to know everything, because there is this whole other perspective from each of our ecumenical partners that can offer insights. I think the other piece that I found to be really important, both from my own perspective, but also so that I could share it with others, is that some of the challenges that Southern New England Conference churches and clergy are facing are the same challenges that are happening in the New England Synod, in Lutheran churches, also in Episcopal churches, as the Episcopal Diocese of Western Massachusetts, which was our other main ecumenical partner. So I think that that's really helpful to know that we are not facing challenges alone. And I think one of the benefits of our ecumenical partnership was an ability for us, not just me, but also when I was able to draw adjudicatory leaders from all three partners together, that we can think together and that we can be creative together, and we can sometimes share the work of figuring out what are reasonable solutions so that we can learn from each other. And we don't carry the weight of this work or these challenges alone, even as a conference, even as a region. So yeah, I think that's how I would answer that question. I think also people would note my enthusiasm for my work.
Which is actually very palpable. I want to go back to what you were just describing around the similitude, and maybe, kick this off with a fairly big question. So take your time to breathe into it. What's your sense of the future of ecumenism? I mean, the word that was coming to my mind is, it's a small world after all. Like when you think about, even with maybe some of our worship practice differences, or maybe some of the theological ways in which we live out our faith, whether through the Episcopalian lens or the Lutheran lens or the United Church of Christ lens. But you've had this seat, in a way, to see a through line. And I'm curious about like, what's your sense of where this is going in the next 4 or 5 years, as we think about this region and we think about our covenant partners?
I think the key to the future of the church, especially in Southern New England, is going to be collaboration. These are our neighbors. You know, we have, particularly in New England, there's a significant number of Episcopal churches in the same communities where our churches are. And I think we can think about that even beyond the Together We Thrive connection. You know, there's often a UCC church, a Methodist church, or a Baptist church, an ABC church. Occasionally there's a Lutheran. I think there's the Lutherans in New England are a little more spread out than and a little more sparse compared to maybe the Midwest. But these are our neighbors. We are working alongside them in our communities. And so I think it is going to be key for us to collaborate on all the different levels. So on the local church level, in the community, what can happen when churches from different traditions maybe have worship services that look different, different polity structures, but when we can come together and serve the community and minister to and with the community together, I think that is going to be the key to vitality and vibrant ministries. And then, kind of moving the lens wider and wider, working together on conference levels. Some stuff is already happening on more national levels, but I think coming together and knocking down the silos of denomination in some ways is going to be essential, because again, we can't do this work alone as local churches. We can't do this alone as a very specific region within a tradition. I think that collaboration is going to be more and more essential. I also am a fan of having multiple perspectives and multiple brains in the room. So I think that we can think better. The Spirit moves in a different way when we are able to come together from different perspectives. And yeah, we're not going to agree on everything. We're not going to do things the same way. And sometimes being in conversation with someone who does something in a very different way than how you do can offer some insights and maybe even spark a new idea. So I think that is going to be really key. One of the things that I really appreciated about Together We Thrive and having the ecumenical partners that we do is that there are some really key theological perspectives that we shared. And so I think that also created a different space, because we weren't worried about where we stood on anti-racism work, where we stood on welcoming LGBTQIA plus community. There are things that we didn't have to argue about or worry about, because we knew that we stood on the same foundation on those key theological understandings. And so I think that's going to be key, right? I mean, we can't collaborate with everyone. Not every tradition is going to be a good collaboration partner. And so finding the pieces that we hold that are similar, and those key things, often they're theological, and using that as the shared page from which we start. And then being able to say, okay, we're standing on this similar foundation. We share these foundational ideas. What can we do from here? And so while I am a huge fan of ecumenism, and I think collaboration is key, I think it's important for us to be deeply intentional and somewhat selective about who we collaborate with, because that is what helps us to focus on our collaboration and not get stuck in the ways that we disagree. And we know that we're serving the same purpose, and we're answering the same call to bring a just world to all, to build anti-racism, to challenge the systems that exist in our world. So yeah, I think that's the key. And that's the place of excitement too.
The benefit of the Southern New England Conference forming and then having as one of, I would say, the pillars is this form covenant partnerships. And what I appreciate about that, the notion of form means that it's still something that can come to pass. Like, we haven't written the whole script on everyone we're ever going to work with. The covenantal language from a UCC perspective, but I think more globally, is so significant because it's hinging on what you're talking about. What is the mutual agreement we're making with each other? And we may find some partners, we wanted to form something, but we couldn't have a covenant with each other. Like, it just didn't work because of some of those values. But then that last part is, we're doing all of this because we hope for a partnership. And for me, that's a willing and a working. It is, how might we share the gifts that we might have if we think about our little hamlet in the Southern New England Conference of the United Church of Christ, but then how we may also benefit from some of the gifts of our siblings from the varying traditions that you've named. And Heather, so much of your work has not only been to cultivate that, but to name it, like to sort of draw it and tease it out. And so my next question for you is, how does an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ find herself leading the grant of Together We Thrive, and then now being drawn towards stewarding a Center for Transformational Leadership? Like, tell me about that call path to get to where you're sitting right now.
Yeah, so it's an interesting journey. So actually, my first career was a public school teacher. I taught 5th grade in public school in rural South Carolina because I got my education degree in South Carolina. I thought I had it all mapped out, right? I started a master's in education. I was going to transfer up to a school in New York so I could really specialize in curriculum development. So knowing some of what's happening in the CTL, this is going to make sense. Yes, I feel a call to write curriculum, to teach concepts and help people to learn and practice learning and integrate learning. So I discerned a call to ministry on a mission trip in North Carolina, where I had met my home church, a group from my home church, and slowly God was pulling me step by step into the local church, because I was a little bit resistant to that in the very beginning. I thought, I'm going to do ministry in prisons with young adults, and I'm going to do youth ministry, and I'm just going to do that. I don't want to be a pastor. And I think of the times that we say things like that, and God just laughs like, okay, yep, you're telling yourself. No. I got news for you. And so I served local churches for 14 years. Both here in Southern New England, and I did serve a church in Western New York. And even in the midst of my ministry, my pastoral ministry, teaching is a huge part of it. So when we talk about the minister as preacher and teacher, the teacher part is a huge piece of my call, because it is such an important part of my discernment journey and my call into ministry. And so I also like to be really creative. I always kind of have been very creative about how do we do things differently to make them more interesting, more easily accessible, or more easily integrated. And so that showed up in my preaching and in my program development when I was working in local churches. And that was a key for Together We Thrive. Together We Thrive, being funded by the Lilly Endowment, is all about experiment, trying things, thinking outside the box, doing something new, recognizing it may work and it may not work. And it's just about learning from what doesn't work. And so when I was invited to be a part of the Center for Transformational Leadership, I saw that as an extension of the work I had done with Together We Thrive, just in terms of seeing listening to the needs that are out there, listening to how we can do things different, figuring out a way to offer information and networking and connection and relationship in a way that had not necessarily been done before. And so for me, it was taking that smaller piece of Together We Thrive, which is really focused on clergy leadership development, and bringing it into the broader picture, rooting it differently in Southern New England Conference and in my own tradition of the United Church of Christ. In that context that I understand, because I'm a UCC lifer. I've always been involved in the United Church of Christ. So bringing that into the specific context of the United Church of Christ denomination and within our region, and expanding it beyond just clergy to also include lay leaders, and to start to look at what do churches as institutions and as local entities need, and how can we do that differently. The challenge, and this is, I love a good challenge. I love a good puzzle. I actually don't do jigsaw puzzles because I feel like my work in life is to do puzzles. So
literally,
right. So I don't actually have a big desire to do puzzles that you put on a table. Is that this is always changing. So the needs are always shifting based on what's happening in the world. So the needs of local churches 3 or 4 years ago are very different than they are right now. And so the puzzle changes. The pieces are different. Maybe I have to go find some pieces. Maybe I have to make some pieces to help put the puzzle together. And as I do that, I also know that as soon as I get it looking like it's almost done, something's going to change, and I'm going to need to take some puzzle pieces out, or bring in some new, or just start over. And that's okay with me. I'm good with that. That to me in some ways is exciting. So yeah, that's kind of how I landed here. And I think leadership development has also been a part of my life work and my life journey. And so it's just, that's, I think, why I get so excited about the work that I get to do as the director for Center for Transformational Leadership, because it is very much aligned with my sense of vocation. And I feel like it really does tap into the gifts that I naturally have. And it's a place where I also can continue to learn, because part of my job is to research and to understand and find new approaches and look for innovations that maybe we haven't done in Southern New England Conference yet, or maybe we haven't done in the UCC. Maybe it's something completely outside of the church world, an innovation that's happening with nonprofits that could be translated or brought into our setting. And so all of that, the learning piece is also a big part of what I love about being the director of the Center for Transformational Leadership.
You know, Heather, you used 2 words multiple times that I'm going to press you a little bit to unpack. The first is, I think you've been talking a lot about change management, as I want to focus on that for a second to say, where have you found comfort in that? I mean, a lot of people, because of the reality of the past few years, hear someone talk about change, transformation, and it's almost like you want to close your ears, because you just like want stability, and like, I just want everything to be the way that I'm. So what in you, or maybe a background or whatever, has made you comfortable with that sense of change management, that things can shift and that you can grow, and that you, like, all the beautiful things that you said that I know you have an intimate comfort with as you lead the center? But what about those folks who just, they can't get on your train, sister, they're not ready? What's made that possible for you?
I think 2 things. One is just having that sense of rootedness. I think part of the reason why I get excited about change and I'm comfortable with it is because so I grew up in the same small town up until I was at age 18. I literally only lived in 2 houses, and they were down the street from each other. So I had a lot of stability in that way. I didn't move. I actually wasn't the new kid anywhere until I went to college. And part of the reason why I went so far away to college was because I wanted that experience. I wanted to do something different. I wanted to be in a context that was going to challenge me because of all the newness. So I think when we can find the places where we're deeply rooted and we have a sense of stability, and I think in terms of churches, having stability about who we are as a church, who we are as our role in the community, and our call as a church. I think that's the place that we find rootedness. And I think that's the second piece, is that call, that sense of connection to God, that when we are clear in our identity, and we are connected to God and open to the call of God and the movement of the Holy Spirit, then I think change is possible. While I find change exciting, I do not like change for the sake of change. And so I think what can be problematic is changing for the sake of changing. Oh, there's something new that's coming down the pike. Let's try that. Okay. The core of really what's important in that is to say that new thing looks shiny and new, but does it align with who we are as people of faith, as a church community, as a community located in a very specific geography and culture? And the answer may be no, that doesn't align. So while it's shiny and new and sparkly and we might find it exciting and interesting, it may not be for us. And so I think that for me is the key, is when change is coming. I mean, change is hard. Even if it's exciting, even if it's going to be beneficial, it's still hard. But if the change is a way in which a church or a person can answer that call and live more fully into the way that the Holy Spirit is moving, then I think that makes it more comfortable, because there is that reminder of like, there is a purpose behind this change. And in moving through this change, we are going to be more fully present to our community, more fully connected to God, more fully embodying who God is calling us to be. So I think that rootedness and that really attunement to the movement of the Holy Spirit and God is what makes lots of change feel not quite so scary and can actually feel exciting and life-giving and encouraging.
Ooh, thank you. I really appreciated I want to call it, the word I would use is invitation you just gave for people who I know, even the formation of the Southern New England Conference, God will do all things. You feel a little sense of, like sometimes there can be an exhaustion about God doing something new, while at the same time we recognize that the world is changing all around us, particularly this faith world. And how do we respond to it in a thoughtful but healthy way? The other phrase that you used was innovation. And I know that the Center for Transformational Leadership has a newsletter, and I'm going to play on the word a little bit, innovation now. And so I'm curious, if I'm a layperson, a local church pastor, or leadership of a church, and I want to engage with the Center for Transformational Leadership, but I don't know that I'm ready for innovation now, maybe innovation tomorrow, what's my entry point? Like, what would be a program or a service or an offering that might give me my, like, okay, this is an amazing opportunity through the Southern New England Conference, a great resource with great leaders such as yourself, but I kind of want to put my toe in first. What would be your invitation?
So I think, well, first I want to say a little piece about innovation that I think is really important is innovation. My understanding of innovation is always relative. So what might be just mind-blowing, door-opening, inspiring as new and different to one church may be old news for another church. But it doesn't matter, because for that church, that thing, that idea, that process, that understanding, that conversation about theology is new and different. So for them, it's innovation. So the Center for Transformational Leadership is not about cookie cutter innovation. It's not about one type of innovation. It's about helping churches to find what feels innovative to them. And so one of the best ways to kind of get a sense of what innovation might look like and all the different ways it might show up is the Lunch and Learns. So every month, other than December, we, through the program year, we have a Lunch and Learn the third Thursday from 12 until 1. And I like to think of that as kind of either a taste and see. So just hearing about some various things that are happening in our conference, either from a consultant or a program or from one of our own churches or one of the leaders in our conference. I also sometimes refer to it when I talk to people about their presentation as an infomercial, because they're not really in depth. It's more of just a kind of surface. Here's something that you might want to know more about. And so the lunch and learns are great because you can see some of the things that are happening, or some of the things that are emerging. And if you want to know more about that thing, we might offer a workshop, or you might send me an email and say, hey, I saw that lunch and learn and I really want to know about that particular thing. So I think that's, in terms of the innovation piece, the lunch and learns are a really great way to just get a little sampling of a lot of different things. The other piece is in terms of where churches are moving. I'm developing some processes for churches that are in a threshold moment, which means they're at a point where change is necessary because staying the same is no longer an option, no longer a viable, vital, life-giving option. And so it's a process to that. And so there's an opening activity that is about looking at the life cycle of a church and thinking about the different capacities and gifts that a church has, and really using that to spark some conversation. So sometimes it's a lunch and learn, sometimes it's an email to me saying, hey, here's what we're thinking about. And whether I can recommend a process or a program, or send you some information. Karen Zeal is part of our team, and she is a walking encyclopedia and has access and just kind of developed a library of just lots of articles and resources. And so, she could be sending you a page that says, here's all the things about staffing, because you're looking at reimagining your staffing model, or here's all the things about, whatever other topic. So there's lots of ways, but if you're someone who just wants to sit in the back row of the church and just check out what's happening before you talk to anyone, I think Lunch and Learns and the newsletter are two ways to really get a little taste of the flavor of the Center for Transformational Leadership. The newsletter is really great. There's lots of resources. There's unique articles, but also links to other organizations, other sources of information too. So those are the two things I think are the best way if you're a back pew sitter for a while.
We're coming to a little bit of a close in our time, so I have one final question, and then I always like to end God Talks with a blessing of affirmation to you as the leader. When I think about all the stuff that you described as a local church leader, I might be thinking, okay, that's thousands of dollars. Like, we don't have money for all of the stuff that you're talking about. Like, we're trying to make ends meet from Sunday to Sunday. So can you speak a little bit about, and I'll gift this little quick thought, part of, I know, Heather, what's in your heart is how do you provide these kind of resources, but in a sustainable and affordable and accessible way. So I would like you to speak to that. And then I'll just throw in a bonus question. If I'm not in the Southern New England Conference, I'm not in within our little 600 hamlet over here, can I still participate in what the center is doing? So if you just speak to those two things, that would be great.
Yeah, so things like the Lunch and Learn series are no cost, thanks to the generosity of individual and churches' proportional giving to our church's wider mission. And so there are some things that are free. And then there's also some programs that I'm working hard to create tiers. So, for example, our threshold navigation process, looking at the process of figuring out how to move through an opportunity for change. There are 4 different levels. One is a DIY, no cost. We send you materials, you lead the conversations within your own churches, and you just let us know if there's additional information that we can send to you. And that's all the way up to the ADAPT program, which has a price tag, but it also comes with some significant accompaniment through a process of discerning next steps in the future of the church. So that's a context I want to bring to everything, so that we can make it as reasonable as possible. And if we can make a no cost or a low-cost opportunity because of proportional giving and the generosity of the Friends of the Conference, then we will do that. And other times we're just trying to make sure that we can sustain this work, as you said. One of the great things that we're still trying to figure out how to do, but it is a thing, is that folks outside of the Southern New England Conference can participate and register for our programs. There will be a fee. It might be a slightly higher fee than an internal participant. But again, that's to help with the infrastructure and to help to make this work sustainable. So that we can continue to do this and continue to develop it and continue to listen and respond to the needs of churches and pastors.
Thank you so much, Heather, for your time. And in these conversations, I always draw attention to Phyllis Wheatley, our Phyllis Wheatley Fund, which is the Phyllis Wheatley Fund for Innovation, because in many respects, we want to model, as in the conference context, the same thing that members of our conference are doing in the context of their local churches. So if you have an opportunity to sow into the Southern New England Conference, we do draw your attention to Phyllis Wheatley, as some of the things that the Phyllis Wheatley might sponsor could find themselves also being a part of that sustainability for the Center for Transformational Leadership. Heather, when I offer blessings to people at the end of these talks, it's a mixture of me listening to their own words, but then also trying to be sensitive to the move of the Spirit. And, you know, for all intents and purposes, what came to me was this sense of an innovation doula. You know, you have this unique possibility in the life of not only the Southern New England Conference, but I want to say in the life of the church, to help people birth that which is next. And not everyone is equipped for that, but I think you have come with the skills that uniquely equip you to be present for people as they're going through that birthing process, but then to be with them as they sort of bring forth that which I think will enrich their communities and enrich their own lives. And so my blessing to you is that you might claim that you might claim the unique gifts that you bring, the gifts of your educational background, the gifts of your call to ministry, your comfort with the change management and innovation, but also, I want to say, a God-given and spiritual sensitivity to meet people exactly where they are. In no time have I seen you in your leadership narrative of birthing the center in its own way. You sort of force that upon anyone. It's sort of, where is a church? Where is a pastor? Where is a leader? Where have they found themselves? And then how can the Center for Transformational Leadership accompany them? And so that would be the other word of blessing that I would give you. May all of the ways in which you've already accompanied our pastoral and lay leaders in this conference, may you also feel the Holy Spirit accompanying you to the fruition of your dreams, the fruition of your call, that you might see it manifest and that you might see the fruit of your labor in real time. And sometimes you have to wait for it, but I hope that you've already started to see the ways in which the programs and services you've offered to Together We Thrive, and also now as a part of the Center for Transformational Leadership, that you've seen the fruit, that you've seen our pastors and our lay leaders and our churches move a little bit more in the direction in which they feel called, simply because of your own yes. So may you be blessed in that. And I'll start introducing you as, this is Reverend Heather, the innovation doula of the Southern New England Conference. Or the United Church of Christ. So thank you for your time, Heather. Thank you, everyone. You'll see in the link above a way to click to find the website for the Center for Transformational Leadership. And I would encourage you to follow Heather's invitation and also subscribe to the Innovation Now newsletter. Thanks for your time, Heather.
All right. Thank you.